Big things happening quickly for the LSU Tigers on the recruiting trail. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit Dat Boot. I'm Jared Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. And we talked a week ago about LSU's 2026 receiver recruiting class. And now we have an awful lot of new information to address just in the past week. Tristen Keys and Jabari Mack, a couple of new additions to that receiver room for Cortez Hankton and company in Baton Rouge, as well as Dylan Purter on the defensive side, a defensive back who commits to Corey Raymond, Jake Olson and company. And so we're going to get into all of that and a little bit more. Sam, how we doing on, what has been yet another hectic week of the spring? People think football season's in the fall and that it's just easy living in the spring, and it never really is.
No, this is just the first of many different chapters of the recruiting calendar. And if you listened to last week's, you can officially declare me the biggest idiot in the world for my predictions on how this 2026 class would shape out for the Tigers. That, of course, predicated on the spring chapter of the recruiting cycle. We'll see what happens with the summer, and then obviously closing the fourth quarter out. But what a week for those Tigers, huh? Boning up in the secondary and at the receiving corps, and Cortez Hankton pushing for early Recruiter of the Year titles.
Yeah, they have. I don't know if it's across the board. I know for us over at On3, they're the number one class in the country right now. TK, with his announcement last Wednesday, put the Tigers atop that list, and then they just continue to add over the weekend with Dylan's announcement on Friday, Jabari's announcement on Saturday. And there's a lot of angles to get into with all of this. You mentioned you kind of beating yourself up a little bit about last week and the predictions and how quickly some things change. When you look at some of that, do you mean the dynamic of how we talked about Booby potentially being the guy that we looked at as the likeliest next guy, and now he would be the third of the group? Or are you looking at it from a standpoint of you thought it would be tough for the Tigers to get all three, and you thought, two out of the three would be good, and now you're thinking, okay, what a lot of LSU fans are wondering, do they get all three of those big names and potentially bring in those five? What's kind of your outlook on where you feel like you need to adjust what you were looking at last week, or what kind of the biggest storyline is for you now this week?
Yeah, I guess, that based off how many receivers LSU took last year, I believe 3, and based off the number of players that Coach Hankton and Sloan and that offense are expected to lose to the draft this upcoming year, which is, I think, going to be in that 4 to 6 or 7 range, potentially off the top of my head, that they were going to try to sign at least 4, if they can, 5 receivers. And with Jakai and Kenny already committed, and based off of intel coming off of 5-star wide receiver Booby Feaster's visit to LSU, intel that I had Jabari Mack leaning potentially out of state, and that Tristen Keys, even though he had mentioned in a recent interview that he was moving closer to a decision, did not think after one visit back to Miami, one visit back to Tennessee, and then a day in Baton Rouge that he would be able to pull the trigger. Now, based off of those 5 total receivers, I probably would have said Tristen Keys would have been the least likely to sign with this class. Now, the fact that he is committed, I'm not trying to break any LSU fans' hearts. I know I'm the heartbreaker of this podcast, and I do this after kids sign with schools or commit to schools, but it's a long way until signing day. And as we saw over the weekend, he already returned to Oxford after committing to LSU. So it's going to be just as bumpy of a follow-up to hold on to Tristen Keys' recruitment because, as I mentioned, Texas A&M, Texas, Miami, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, and Ole Miss all still covet the number 1 or 2 receiver in the country, depending on where you look. I think big picture, getting Jabari Mack on board early is a tremendous victory. This is someone who you could have seen in the class, whether they sign Tristen Keys, Booby Feaster, or don't, based off of the in-state talent. Jabari Mack was the top in-state receiver, the top in-state target at the position. And it was someone who, again, had hinted that maybe he didn't need that much more time in his recruitment to know. But Jabari Mack was already planning 2 visits to Texas A&M, 2 visits to Texas, and of course was going to get to LSU. Now getting him on board after they rearranged plans at the last minute due to his track meet to get to LSU early. Now on board, I feel great about him signing with LSU, being the in-state kid. And I feel like whether it's Tristan Keys, who ends up sticking with this class, or potentially if there is shakeup, that Boobie Feaster, as we have mentioned multiple times, has long-term interest in his fit at the Tigers, given his family's ties to Louisiana and the opportunity to play early in Baton Rouge for Cortez Hankton. Now I feel better about, hey, whether it's Tristan Keys or Feaster or even just the in-state guys, this is a pretty dynamic receiving core. And right now, if you're LSU, even if those schools are threatening, you still like where you're sitting playing from ahead with Tristan Keys.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you what your concern level was to know that TK immediately heads to Ole Miss, and we know that it was going to be a to the end battle, regardless of committed or not, to try to keep him. I'm not real surprised. I'm not shocked that TK ends up committing to the Tigers at some point. It was a nice surprise because so many had talked about Tennessee and Alabama and Ole Miss and some others being more likely landing spots potentially. But I know that he's had some admiration for the Tigers and been to Baton Rouge a few times, and I mean, not far from home, right up there, just a couple of hours away, up there in Hattiesburg. I was pretty surprised by the timing, as you mentioned, though. But to go immediately to Oxford, concerned fans right off the bat, / you heard from fans of other programs on Twitter who were quick to jump on that tidbit. What would your confidence level, concern level, however you want to frame it, be for where LSU stands with Keys? A commitment, but a commitment who is obviously still, entertaining some of those other options out there. And, worth saying too, a commitment who, with these subsequent additions to LSU's class Friday and Saturday, was quickly on Twitter with tiger emojis and celebrating those additions. But your thoughts on just where they stand, knowing that the battle is far from over?
Yeah, I think at this point, a conservative number would be somewhere between 6 to 7. The difference between Tristan Keys and my long-term percentages that he sticks in this class is different than Jabari Mack or Kenny Darby, is that even though schools are still pursuing those guys, they're from Louisiana. That's a different connection than what Tristan Keys has and what he's facing with Ole Miss. And, Mississippi kids generally do commit early and then have a second phase of their recruitment. So the surprising element is that he commits to LSU. That's a plus for LSU. You'd rather play from this position than the converse. The issue is that even though he's committed, the sense is that he's still going to continue to take his official visits. He's still taking the rest of his spring visits, which right now includes visits to Austin and College Station. And I'm forgetting another big visit he had on his agenda. But the schools that are pursuing him, the Ole Misses, the Alabamas, the Auburns, and the Tennessees, those are schools that, according to sources more familiar with his recruitment, are the ones that need to be reckoned with down the stretch. Now, LSU was included in that conversation, and I think we both saw camp at Friday Night Lights. It was in a very exclusive event with some of their top targets in the 2026 and 2027 class. Hankton has stayed on him, treated him like a priority. So that the connection is genuine. It's just going to have to last through some pretty stiff competition. So it would be, I think, naive to think that now that he committed, it's a safe bet that they're going to sign him in several months.
And it's great to see LSU obviously in better footing right now with him than we maybe would have guessed a week ago. And you talk about, them kind of leading the way at this point, even if it is going to continue to be a battle all the way through. What is your sense of, could they land all 5 of these guys when we talk about Boobie Feaster as well? I mean, you mentioned the aspect of, okay, if you can get 4 of them, it's great. And it is. I think we should tell LSU fans, if you get Boobie or TK and the 3 in-state guys, that is one hell of a receiving haul for the 2026 class. But a lot of fans wonder, man, can we get all five, knowing some of those dynamics you mentioned before of how much they're replacing right now with some veterans on this roster, some veteran transfers on this roster, guys who want to make the leap to the NFL after this year. A lot of these guys want to play pretty early, and there's only one ball to go around from play to play, and guys have a willingness to, everybody eats sort of mentality. But at some point, a lot of times only so many guys at one position want to go in the same class. What do you think the potential is of, can LSU possibly get all five?
Slim to none. And not to say that, any knock on
Stick
anything.
with the heartbreaker rule.
Yeah, you know what? Let's not sugarcoat things. I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the best receiving core, hauls in recent memory, and you can look at when Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Devontae Smith and co went to sign with Alabama, or some of the hauls that Brian Hartline has pulled into Ohio State, with Jeremiah Smith's year or the year prior. Just so decorated and 4- and 5-star guys. I think the best case scenario, and we laid it out on last week's podcast, was that they're able to keep the Jabari Macks and the Kenny Darbys and the Ja'Kai Andersons in state. Those are 3 4-star guys. And of that group, Jabari Mack is a wide receiver 1 sort of prospect. And then you're able to kind of add the cherry on top in the form of this additional blue chipper from out of state, whether it's Boobie Feaster or Tristen Keys or Jason Matthews was high on Cortez Hankton's board. And I know that he's obviously been after Aaron Gregory as well out of Georgia. But, whether it was TK or Feaster, I mean, yeah, of course they would take both commitments. I think that just with the heavyweights that are still involved, that are continuing to chip away at Tristen, that are going to continue to sell Boobie Feaster on coming in and playing early at their universities with, Texas A&M, and next up, Texas will host Feaster, and then he'll go out to Oregon. And when you have 4 receivers like Tristen Keys to Mack to Ja'Kai to Kenny on board already, it's easy to say, hey, we have 1 or 2 guys committed. So why don't you be the face of our class? Feaster, Gregory, you name it. And it's easier to see the path to a field, I think, a little bit faster.
The group that is committed right now, focusing on the TK and Jabari additions to Ja'Kai and Kenny, something that we've talked about a few different times. I guess last week, looking at the potential of this class, and also even just talking about the in-state guys, just kind of how different of skill sets and strengths and whatnot they bring to the equation. When you look at the 4 commitments right now, if they all end up in purple and gold, Tristen Keys, Jabari Mack, Kenny Darby, Ja'Kai Anderson, how nice of a complementary group is that in terms of what they each bring to the table? Certainly they can do some similar things in some ways, but they're all very different players.
Yeah, I mean, when you're trying to build out a wide receiving core, and obviously what LSU has right now with Nick Anderson and the names Aaron Anderson and Barry and Brown, they all do different things. They have some overlapping qualities, but they all kind of excel in different areas. And in this 4 wide class that LSU has right now, you have a lot of similar, you have a lot of comps. I mean, Tristen Keys, watching him with SFE, having seen him for his season opener as a junior at Hattiesburg last year. Shout out our boy Shay's alma mater out there in the SIP. Someone at SFE compared Tristen to basically Jeremiah Smith light, and it's pretty fair. If you think about it, obviously he doesn't have the same elite stature of a Jeremiah Smith at 6'3" and 220-ish pounds. But Tristen Keys can play above the rim. He can stretch the field. He can make plays at all different levels of the field. He's a threat after the catch. He's a dangerous, high pointing the ball. He's just a gifted athlete that can do so many different things. I think he's a true wide receiver 1 on the outside that, commands 1, if not 2 or 3 defenders on a given play. Jabari Mack, I think, we always talk about the volume he gets at Destrehan. But we talked about it last week. He very quietly just comes up with these insane plays from time to time. I just think he has so much potential that's waiting to be untapped. And when you think about his potential in a receiving core that could include Tristan Keys or a Kenny Darby, who we've seen at Airline is a threat to take the top off the defense on any play, or Ja'Kai Anderson, who is just so quick twitch and explosive underneath, and can do so many different things if you with the ball in his hands or to distract the defense. You just see someone like Jabari Mack, who again at 200 pounds can get downfield. He has sub 4.4 speed, but is also really dangerous with the ball in his hands and really strong, strong of a route runner working at different levels of the field. I think it would open up some for him to be like, wow, this day, Jabari Mack is LSU's best receiver. On this day, Kenny Darby is LSU's best receiver. On this week, Tristan Keys was LSU's best receiver. And I think that their skill sets, while, yeah, you probably heard me say some of the same skills, they all possess, kind of excel in different areas, which it keeps the defense honest. So if they're able to sign these four in particular, it'd be incredulous. Just given the magnitude and the perfect complementing skill sets that they all possess.
We're 15 minutes deep into this and have only mentioned a little bit of the defense. We're giving all this love to the receivers. And so Corey and Jake and those guys, Blake Baker, they're wondering, look, we got a guy on Friday too that we're really hyped about. And so let's talk some about Dylan Purter adding, a guy from out there in Alabama, another situation like we talk about some with TK in Mississippi for LSU to go dip into one of these nearby SEC states and get a prospect who Dylan, I think, has been a little bit more under the radar than some of the other members of this class in a full scale recruiting standpoint, but has picked up some good steam with some other programs around the SEC, and the Tigers able to land him on Friday, a guy that I think a potentially really versatile defensive back in that secondary for those guys that plays a ton of corner for his high school team, but they look at as maybe being more of a cover safety alongside of, an Aiden Hall they can use a little bit more coming downhill and being a thumper. Blaine Bradford, certainly, if they went and added him from right down the road at Catholic High. When you look at Dylan, who for a lot of people was a surprise commitment at this stage in the recruiting process, how nice of an addition for the defensive side of the ball was that for the Tigers?
Yeah, he's one of the corners that has been kind of one of those eye catchers in the early part of the offseason in that 7-on-7 setting. He's someone that through January and February heard a lot of coaches or people on the scene at 7-on-7 say, hey, have you seen this kid? He's bigger than, we thought, or he moves better than we thought. And in reviewing the tape, I know that I was hoping to see him here in the next couple of weeks or months before his commitment. As someone, is this guy a 4-star guy? Is he a 250 guy? But someone who has again had an incredible junior season. He's playing corner for his school, kind of like in Louisiana with a small classification school. Kind of just has to be that dude for his program, and is that and so much more. But yeah, whether he's a safety, whether he's a nickel, you love that movable chess piece. You love when Jake Olson and Corey Raymond are in sync on their evaluations. Even though he's a potential nickel guy, he's got some length to him. So you could see him working in different spots. Someone who, again, really excited to see potentially either camp in Baton Rouge maybe this summer as the staff gets a closer look at him. But you love the versatility, you love the playmaking ability, you love the ability to move at that size, which is, a Corey Raymond specialty in the secondary.
And LSU, I mentioned before, number one class in the country right now for on three. Certainly, I didn't do a good job of looking across the board at all the recruiting services, but when you're in that position, that's another thing that fans get excited about and wonder, could we finish this class as the number one class? I think there's going to be a lot of challenges to that, certainly, but also the Tigers have a great in-state foundation for something like that and are appearing pretty well positioned with a lot of other prospects heading into, the back half of spring and then ultimately summer here right around the corner. What do you think is the potential early on with a long way to go of LSU competing down the stretch to hang on to that number one class potentially? What does that look like, that process?
I think there's a couple of key areas. Are they going to pull off a clean sweep in the state? I think if they're able to keep a Lamar Brown in state, if they're able to keep a Blaine Bradford in state, those are two whether they're 5-star or industry 5-star or composite 5-star or whatever. They're blue chippers, and those are the guys that really move the needle with these rankings. These are top 25, 30, 35 guys in the country. What does Joe Sloan do at quarterback? Obviously, a guy like a Bo Bentley. That's a highly ranked guy. It's an out of state guy, so it'd be a difficult pull, but obviously someone that they're really high on, who just visited last week and is working on his official visits. So are they able to get one of these top we talked about Elite 11 a little bit off air? Are they one of the Elite 11 guys that are going to land in this class? And then obviously, how does the rest, what national polls do they end up making when you pull in a number one class? And LSU has done this quite a few times, and they were at one point trending to do so last year. Who are the two or three just out of state recruiting battles that your position coach or coordinator was able to just kind of win out for, the unexpected victories? When Coach O did it, it was Elias Ricks going out into California with Corey Raymond and obviously making the Ricks family Louisiana's own. But who do they win for this year? Is it a Darius Gray, the number 1 or 2 interior offensive lineman in the country out of Virginia? Do they go somewhere else in terms of edge? A Landon Barnes from Duncanville or a KJ Ford from Duncanville, 2 guys on their board. So are they able to pull a couple of those guys and potentially including or not including the quarterback, as well as obviously locking down Louisiana? You and I both know whether they're the number 1 class in the country or a top 10 group. LSU is always at its best when you lock down the state. They've almost done that completely already in 2026. So a credit to the staff and the work that they've done. Can they close with Blaine Bradford? Obviously, he was on campus over the weekend. He heads up to Texas and to Ohio State coming up here in the next couple of weeks. And when Lamar Brown was just back at A&M, they do not intend to go anywhere in this race, and they're going to have a fist fight until July 4th over Lamar Brown. But beyond that, everything is in front of them to contend for that number 1 class in the country.
And a little love for the 2027 group as we kind of wrap this up. We've hit on a lot of the new news for LSU's 2026 class, but I've been working on a lot of stuff over here with On3 regarding the new On 300 group, where notably a guy from, we talked about Shea's alma mater earlier in Hattiesburg, my alma mater in Jesuit, has a big man named Zyron Forstall, who is now the number 3 ranked prospect in the country for On3, and a guy that we've had a chance to watch a little bit of the last couple of years over there for the Blue Jays. There haven't been a lot of prospects in the country that have had a more ascendant sophomore year in terms of coming from under the radar for a lot of people going into his sophomore year to now starting to gain a ton of traction on the recruiting trail and in the rankings. When you look at Big Zyron over there on Carrollton and Banks, now measuring up 6'3", 6'4", 235, 240, and what he brings to the table, I think a lot of fans are still figuring out who is this young man. From what you've seen of him a year and a half into his high school career, I mean, how impressed are you with just his early foundation as a prospect?
Yeah, I saw someone for your company, I think his name is Chad Simmons, say somewhere from downtown New Orleans, and didn't want to publicly correct him, but he's a.
I mean, look, just hop right there, take the right on Canal, and you'll be there in no time downtown.
Zyron is a monster from Mid-City, please. You know what? My last in-person eval for games, obviously his freshman season, where he was a man amongst boys for that Jesuit defense. You could tell that he was going to be just kind of a different level of athlete for that Blue Jay defense. And then did just get to see him, I think it was earlier this month, if not just about a month ago, in the Under Armour next setting in New Orleans, where you see that he's a pup, but he looks about like he's going into his senior season, and he moves and bends extremely well. He carries that 240 seamlessly, and you could definitely see him getting up to 250, 255 by the time his junior season at Carrollton and Banks gets underway. You love that he's going to be playing in the Catholic League this year. I was speaking to his trainer yesterday and a mutual friend in the New Orleans area about what am I excited to see about. I'm anxious to see him in the Catholic League going against these hard-nosed Rummel offensive lines and the Brother Martin offensive line, the Carr offensive line and the Warren Easton offensive line and the Ogg offensive line, because he's going to have to continue to face double teams and potentially triple teams. I wanted to see what he's able to do. You know, in the camp setting, you see he's a very effective pass rusher. But I think he's someone that people are projecting a little bit. So I think he knows that. I think he's very determined and cognizant of it. He's someone who's aiming for double-digit sacks as a junior. I think he is perfectly capable of doing it. I'm so excited to see how our boy Coach Vanali unleashes Zyron. I think that he's able to do more than just rush the passer. Like I said, I think he'll be playing at north of 250 this year. So I'm excited to see him blow up some plays behind the line of scrimmage and wreck some running attempts. This is what the Catholic League is predicated on, running the football and playing defense. I want to see Zyron do the best on defense. I think he has a chance to compete with Big Rich for, I'm about to say, be the defensive player of the year, but I think give Big Rich and Aiden Hall and a couple other stout players in this Catholic League some run and make some noise. And more than anything, he's got his stuff together, not only on the field and off the field. So I think Zyron for sure is going to be someone who's going to be impressing people and becoming more of a household name in a couple of months.
His length and athleticism has been so impressive from early on. I think we've shared the story before of watching him out there playing 7-on-7 as I think a 14-year-old playing 15U 7-on-7 and being by far the biggest kid on the field, even though he was maybe the youngest, and the way that he moved around at that point. And to continue to get bigger and stronger and more technically sound over there at Jesuit and in the Catholic League, where he's playing early on against, you mentioned some of those offensive lines from the other schools around that league that are all in a lot of cases, he's going against old guys that are 2 and 3 years older and are that much, more further advanced in their technical and are always salty groups there, establishing the run and blocking opposing defensive linemen. And so to see some of his ability early on and know the potential that's there, it's been fun to watch his development so far, and definitely looking forward to what's ahead these next couple of years. We've talked a ton about, we've referenced some of the on-3 stuff, and so I apologize for harping on 3 as much, but make sure you're keeping up with Sam and everything he and the team are doing over there at Rivals, as well as the stuff, Chad, Shay, and I and company are doing over there on 3, because as much as we only meet week to week, there is so much happening hour to hour every day. And so keep up with both of the networks and everything that's happening throughout the course of the week. Sam, you have anything else you want to throw out there? I know it's busy times right now.
There is. I had started compiling the first ever Aura rankings, which encompass both new Aura, Jarrett, which is like things that I'm learning like live, right? Like the McNeese State mascot or whatever we wanted to call him, aficionado. That's new. That's new Aura. But like, Aaron Rodgers is
Amir
Aura.
Khan.
Yeah.
You said mask. He's the manager. Yeah, Amir.
That's what I meant.
But go ahead.
It's been a long day. I haven't slept much in weeks. So it's like I don't want to forget about Aura staples of the icons of the past. So I am slowly but surely putting together the Aura rankings of big Aura figures of years past and current to debut on Recruit Dat Boot. I'm just really wrapping my head around the whole concept. I think Derek Queen has Aura after that shot on Sunday, but I'm not sure 100%. I'm like 88% sure he's got Aura, but there is like a still part of me that's like, does he? So I'm working on it.
the escalation from a week and a half ago, you kind of complaining and side eyeing, like everybody's talking about Aura. I don't know about this, like what's going on, to now working behind the scenes on the Aura rankings. And for folks, I mean, for football fans in Louisiana who maybe aren't paying as much attention to the tournament, Sam watching his Maryland Terrapins this weekend and the freshman Derek Queen hitting the buzzer beater to advance past Colorado State. I mean, I know you were watching closely. There was a lot of talk this weekend. Was that a travel? A lot of folks trying to call into question just the aura levels of that shot. I guess I don't fully know what the hell we're talking about either. But how did you feel seeing some of that? Probably don't care a whole lot about any of the questions.
Let me tell you what, if you said the word travel, then you lack aura. I'll say that.
There you go. I can't wait to see what more ways aura creeps into this show moving forward through the rest of the spring.
The show is
Because Sam
oozing
is
with
latched
aura,
on.
okay?
There you go. We'll be back next week with more Recruit That Boot on Louisiana versus all y'all. And as always, weekly, week in, week out aura from Sam Spiegelman and Jarrett Rosa. Thank y'all for tuning in. And until next time, y'all be well. Y'all be aura filled. You be aura filled, or are you aura filled, or are you just aura? Like, how do you use that in that context? Till next time, y'all be aura.
Or filled with aura.
Yeah, I don't know. So I feel like aura is more of like a surrounded by type thing.
Sorora filled. I'm Sorora filled right now.